I'm Devin Wendelspect. I am the iGenet English Forum moderator here for the forum. Really lovely to be here with everyone. We are having a really great session today. We're going to be talking about what editors want, how to pitch, tips and tools and advice for pitching, and most importantly, how to build a strong relationship with your editor. We have a really good guest today with us, a frequent iGenet contributor who has a lot of pointers and a lot of tips and advice. She actually has a small presentation for us today as well. So we're going to get into it. I'm going to introduce our speaker and we're going to go from there. So our speaker is Christiana Bede. She's a freelance journalist with over 10 years of experience in bylines, including in ID, The Independent, Vice, Refinery 29, among others. She's also a contributor to the International Journalism Network, where she has interviewed many journalism experts on topics from AI tools to pitching strategies. Using her practical and theoretical media knowledge, she has also been a speaker and trainer at national and international events and workshops, focusing on offering freelancers valuable tools and insights. She also has a weekly newsletter, which I will not try to pronounce in Italian, but it's called Jobs for Writers in Italian. It has over 7,000 subscribers, and it targets professional writers looking for paid opportunities. Christiana Bede, welcome to the forum. We're really happy to have you here today, and we're happy to have your expertise as we talk to people about editing and pitching. Where to start? I know you have a presentation to start with, so if you want to do a quick introduction of yourself, then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. Let me just share. Can you all see this clearly?
100%.
So, hi everyone, and thank you, Devin and iGenet for having me today. As Devin said, I am Christiana Bede. I'm a freelance journalist from Italy, and over the past decade, I've contributed to many international publications, like Devin said, like ID, Vice, The Independent, and of course, iGenet. And alongside writing, I've also had the pleasure of training other journalists through different workshops and courses. Many of them focus on pitching and freelancing specifically. But let me be honest, it wasn't always clear to me how to effectively interact with editors, which is what we are going to talk about today. So I started writing articles over 10 years ago with no media connection, like I suppose many of you, and while working other jobs. And since then, I went through my fair share of rejections and unanswered emails, as it always happens. In 2014, then I got an MA in digital journalism from Goldsmiths University of London, which gave me the solid journalistic skills and technical skills that allowed me to start freelancing more seriously. And through relentless pitching and spending some time in newsrooms, I began to learn a bit more about how editors think and what makes freelancers stand out. I also figured that what I was learning by myself or the question I had about journalism could help others as well. So I started pitching and contributing to iGenet. And since then, I've had the chance to interview dozens of media experts and editors, asking them directly many of the things that I wished someone had shared with me, including the advice that I collected for this presentation, and especially for the article that became the title of our conversation today, which is What Editors Want Beyond a Good Story. You can actually find it at the QR code on the screen if you want to save it for later. For this article, I actually interviewed two editors, Georgia Lewis, who's a freelance editor with over 25 years of experience, and Tim Herrera, who's a former editor at the New York Times, and also the founder of Freelancing with Tim, which is also a great newsletter with tips for freelancers in case you want to check it out. But throughout the presentation today, I'll share insights from numerous interviews that I've had with editors, and you'll be able to find all their detailed advice in my articles, which I'll share at the end, so don't worry. Before discussing practical advice, though, I'd like to talk a bit about why it is important to understand as much as we can about editors' expectations and needs. Because, of course, on a practical level, it is important to secure commissions and therefore to sustain our livelihood as freelancers. But also as journalists, it is essential to ensure that the important stories that we want to cover don't go untold. So I know that approaching editors can be intimidating because editors for freelancers are sort of gatekeepers. But I want to share a quote that I think is really encouraging to keep in mind. When I interviewed Tim Herrera for my article, he said, editors need freelancers as much as freelancers need editors. This is good to keep in mind because it says that we're basically on the same team and we are working toward the same goal, which is delivering great stories to the public. So we need to see editors almost as collaborators, and understanding their needs isn't just about making their work easier, but also making our reporting and our storytelling more effective. So I want to encourage you to go for it, to pitch. Most editors I've talked to over the years say that working with early career writers or even first-time writers and seeing them grow is one of the most rewarding parts of the job. So even if you're starting out, please keep pitching, because actually the first thing that editor wants beyond a good story is a good pitch. A pitch, as you may know, is a sort of concise presentation of a story idea that is typically sent via email. But why a pitch and not a complete draft? No, you may ask. Because sending a complete draft, which is like a whole article that you've already written and you send to an editor, suggests that there is little room for an editor to work with you on the piece. So even if the idea may be good, maybe with some editorial guidance, it could become a published story, but it might get rejected if it's sent as a full draft. So actually sending pitches can increase our chances of getting commissioned. Only send complete draft if it's specifically requested. It may happen sometimes. I'm not seeing it very often. Or Herrera says there are 2 more cases. There are 2 exceptions where it might be better to send complete drafts. One is for opinion pieces, because you may need to write the whole thing to convey your full argument. And in some cases, but this is like 50%, for personal essays. For the same reason, you may have to, explain your whole story. So basically what we just said until now is that, sending a good pitch is crucial to land a commission. But what makes a good pitch? This is like $1 million question, but there is no single way to create a good pitch. But there are some suggestions I gathered that I think can help you give your story ideas the best chance of being picked up by an editor. So let's see some key elements that we should always include in our pitches. The first ones are an angle and a headline. A clear angle, which means that we're not suggesting a topic, but we are suggesting a precise story, together with a compelling title for that story, shows that, your idea is well developed. You will find that a lot of the time, if we can't find a working title for our pitch, it means that we don't really know what our story is yet, and it's not the editor's job to find that story for us. So this is really important. Also, we need to include details, in a few lines, we need to explain our story idea, why it's important now, in some cases. So we need to show the research that we've done for our pitch, and possibly even provide like a word count, like how long do we see this article being. We also need to include potential sources. Now, for first-time writers, this is sometimes confusing, but you always need to identify and to include your potential sources or the expert you plan to interview. It's not an editor's job to provide you with contacts. So sometimes you can just describe their professional profile, for instance, instead of suggesting specific people. But you always need to be confident that you'll be able to reach them and interview them. To make our pitches more effective, we also should include previous work. So this can be even self-published. So you don't need to have already bylines in traditional media. To show your skills and your writing style, you can even link to like a blog or maybe a newsletter or, any other project that you think may convince the editor that you'll be able to deliver the work that you are proposing. And also, especially if you're not pitching an article, like a written article, but maybe like a podcast or a photo gallery or a video or a data-driven piece, in the pitch, you also need to consider how the format will impact your story. So you may have to explain the experience or the storytelling or the aesthetic and all the unique elements that you will provide that are specific to that format and how they will enhance the story. So basically, these are some of the main elements that should always be included in a pitch. So let's say now we can prepare our pitch and it's good. How should we proceed? It's best to proceed with one pitch at a time, one idea at a time, because especially at the beginning, sending an email with too many pitches can seem a bit unfocused, like we're not really passionate about any of them, or maybe we didn't research enough about any of them, And we also need to remember that editors are often very busy, so they may prefer to handle one proposal at a time. Now I'm going to show you a screenshot of my actual pitch for the IJNet article, What Editors Want Beyond a Good Story. As you can see, while I give details about the story I want to write, I'm giving examples of things that I think I may be able to include, like timely edits, not receiving an email with other newsroom editors copied in, and things like that. And also, I include potential sources. You see, at the end, I say, I was thinking to ask comment from, but I don't follow the advice I just gave you, like step by step, I don't include all the information that I just told you that it's important to include. Why? Because I have an established relationship with the editor that I'm writing to. So I know the length of the articles they publish, the structure they expect for an article like this, and they also know me. I don't need to provide proof of previous work. They know I file on time. So far there was never an issue with my articles not delivering what the pitch had promised. So when you first start to pitch a newsroom, you need to be a bit more thorough. But then, with time, things get a bit more flexible. I actually went to check my very first pitch to IJNet from 2018 today, and it looks very different from the one that I'm showing you now. It included all the information I talked about before and even more. 6 years later, things are a bit different. So at some point, when you start writing for an editor for a while, you can even get to the point where maybe you have an idea, but it's not really developed, and you can brainstorm with them and to find the best angle for it. But this takes some time, and you also have to have established that collaborative relationship first. Because pitching is just the first step, great pitches can open doors, but for us, it's really important to keep them open when we're freelancing. So I know firsthand how exhausting it is to pitch to one outlet after another. So I think it's very important to nurture long-lasting relationships with editors to make our work more sustainable by increasing the chances of getting repeat assignment. But what makes a contributor stand out as a possible long-term collaborator? So editors value different things. The first one is reliability, So you need to meet deadlines, you need to respect the brief and ensure that your work is polished and well-researched. Editors remember writers that make their job easier by delivering high quality work on time. So for instance, if you're late with a piece because, life happens, just let the editors know as soon as possible. Editors also value freelancers or contributors that have an understanding of the publication. So of course you need to align with the publication content in your pitches, but if you can also show that you understand their style and maybe their readership, that can really make you stand out, It's part of an editor's job to fit your writing to this aspect, but if you can deliver at this level, you may become a preferred choice. Editors also value openness and flexibility. We need to be ready to adjust our story angle based on new development or editorial input. Feedback is never a critique of our skills, but it's a tool to improve. And also remember that openness and flexibility go both ways. You can also offer your own insights to the editor if you believe it can enhance the story, It's important to remember that if your pitch evolves into something that you're not comfortable with, you also have the power to step back. So these are basically some of the main takeaways from my interviews with editors, but I thought I'd share a couple of additional things that I also found helpful personally when starting out to secure a more steady stream of work. The first one was maintaining relationships with editors that had given me my first breaks. When you start writing, it's really tempting to want to diversify your portfolio a lot, show that you've written for all the publications out there. But if you stick with the editors that already, respect and trust your work, that maybe can lead you to more regular commissions. Also cultivating a niche of topics, you can start with like a specific area and then expand from there. For instance, I began writing about art because I had an academic background in art history, but then I expanded to gender equality in the arts, and then gender equality more broadly, and then maybe the health and media sectors, but from a gender perspective. So, having a niche isn't essential, but because I was monitoring those topics closely and consistently, I could come up with more angles to pitch. And the last one is finding a community. I think this is really important, especially as freelancers. It's not just for professional networking, but to share your challenges and possible strategies. A community can also be an online platform. I don't live in a major media center, so my community is mostly online. As Devin said, I have a newsletter with 7,000 subscribers. These people are also part of my community, And if you went to journalism school, you already know people in your field. You can share advice, you can collaborate, and these people may become editors that you want to pitch in the future, or may already be editors you want to pitch. So I'm not gonna bore you with these slides any longer, but to wrap it up, like what editors want beyond a good story includes, of course, quality work. And this goes from appropriate submissions to well thought out pitches to good articles. But to turn one commission into long-term collaboration, we also need reliability in terms of like meeting deadlines, publication standards and expectations, and flexibility. So adjusting to changes well, also being easy to communicate with, We need basically to be able to embrace the challenges with professionalism, a collaborative spirit, and also transparency. Of course, all these recommendations are in no way steadfast rules, but I hope they've been helpful. And then for more detailed advice, you can read the iGen8 articles that inspired the presentation that you can find with this QR code. And thank you so much for listening so far.
Thank you so much, Cristiana. I want just a little thing from the chat. I saw there's a couple comments in there that said at the beginning we were having trouble with video. Can everyone just give me a thumbs up if you can see the video now, please? Amazing.
Oh, with my video? Ah, okay.
It looks like we're all good, and there was a slight hiccup on the tech. We're all good.
Okay.
Fantastic. So, Cristiana, thank you so much for that. That was just a really good rundown. There's a question in here that was actually a question I wanted to ask. So we're going to start with this one first. which is this is all really good for people who already have like clips to be able to point to and that kind of stuff. But you actually wrote an article for us that was about how to secure your first pitch when you are just starting out, when you're
Yes.
your first time journalist. What advice would you have for journalists who are students right now, or they're very early in their career and they might not have like a large portfolio to be able to point to when pitching to an editor?
Sure, sure. This is like a crucial point because I feel like everyone that is starting out feels like, oh my God, because I don't have a portfolio, I'm not going to be able to pitch, you know? My first piece of advice, which is not actually in the article, but I think it's like where it all starts, is you need to read, you need to read a lot. You need to read a lot the news, you need to read magazine, newsletter, whatever you like, because that's how you learn what a publication is interested in. And that's also a way to find stories because you might read something and you may see a different angle to approach the topic, or you may notice that, a particular voice is missing from the conversation, or that an aspect of the story isn't clear, So to read is, I think it's the fundamental thing. We cannot think about being journalists if we don't read the news. But also, okay, if you want to get a portfolio to include in your pitches and you haven't written for like traditional media, there are many things that you can do to create a portfolio. As I said, you can, for instance, start to self-publish, Today you can start a blog, like a free blog. You don't need to write on it every week. You just need to maybe publish a couple of pieces, just to show your writing style and maybe your reporting skills, that you can deliver an article. Or maybe you can launch a newsletter. Newsletters today are very popular. That's also a way to create a community around your writing. So maybe that will be helpful even when you approach bigger platform, because maybe you already have a readership, and there are many platforms that allow you to create a newsletter for free. So it's not something you have to pay to create. If you are studying journalism, you can also maybe use articles that you've written during your course. I'm sure you've written articles, and that can also become they can also become part of your portfolio, or any other school assignment that you're really proud of and that you really think, okay, this shows that I can write, that I can research, that I can reach sources. So it doesn't really have to be all articles from like proper journalism, like published in like legacy media and stuff. So I think you can also approach maybe smaller platforms, like smaller media orgs. There are like publications that encourage for first-time writers to approach them, maybe not the biggest ones, but it doesn't matter, because in the end, when you send a portfolio, yes, to have those big names there clearly can have make an impact. But the editor is looking for proof that you can deliver an article. So it doesn't matter if it was written in your local newspaper, if it's a good article, it will look like a good article. So maybe, even student publications, if you're at uni, even if you don't want to write for them full time, you can maybe propose to freelance a couple of pitches, to publish a couple of pieces, and then so you can use those. So there are actually many ways to go around this. I think people usually think, a portfolio has to be like, I wrote for this and that, but it doesn't really have to be that way. But there have to be, you need to include a portfolio. This is something that I've heard time and time again. So this is really important. Also, if you're starting out and you are looking for opportunities, I think you should check social media like LinkedIn, or maybe like X, like formerly Twitter, because editors often actually post call for pitches. So this gives you a great advantage because it informs you about who is already looking for stories, and specifically also which stories. So there are also specific newsletters. Some of them are free. So I think Journal Resources, The Opportunity is a free one as well, that lists also call for pitches. So those are also super helpful. So this would be another tip for people starting out. And when you get to the point of pitching, you know, we always say this, but this is really important. And I see this with people that are starting out, that it's really difficult. You need to pitch a story and not a topic. So you really need to spend some time in putting together a well thought out pitch, you know, to formatting the email correctly, doing some spell check, because that shows that you're professional, and include all the elements that we talked about before. So, you know, the angle, the headline, the details, the potential sources, and the previous work, like we just said, you know, with all the, I think with what we said before about a portfolio, there's not a person that cannot put together something, you know what I mean? So, you know, think about it like that. The question you always have to ask yourself is, how can I give this story the best chances of being published, you know? So I think that's the guiding question to keep in mind to help you with all this. And the last important thing, I think, it's like, you know, not to be discouraged by rejection. Maybe people don't like to talk about it, but it's normal. Everyone has been through it. I have been through it. All the people I know that are freelancing have been through it. So you need to keep pitching. It will feel less painful in time. And, you know, when you're new, you can also ask for feedback. For instance, like, you know, you can say, I'm just starting out, you know, could I get some feedback on this pitch? What could I improve in the future? Not all editors will respond, but there is no harm in asking, really.
Amazing, Christiana. I think this is all just amazing, great stuff. I have more questions, but we have so many questions from the audience. So I think I'm just going to
Okay,
switch
yes,
directly
yes.
to audience questions. Let me see. We have just a ton here. So I'm going to see what's, well, this is a good one, which is, how do you find good communities for freelancers that might have some of this pitch, where the pitches are coming from, all that kind of stuff?
So actually freelancers, I think, especially in recent years, have come together a lot, because I think we all realize that we, you know, it's better when we work together rather than compete. And there are a lot of communities online dedicated to freelance journalists and freelancing in general. I know a few for sure in Europe and in the UK. Like, as I said, Journal Resources, for instance, is a platform, like an online platform that has a lot of resources that are free. You can also become a member, but you can use them for free. There's like a Society of Freelance Journalists, which I think has got like a big Slack community. So like a community on Slack as well. If you go to, like, I don't know, journalism events, for instance, right? There's always like at least a panel on freelance journalism. And if you check the people that are speaking, they are probably part of some kind of group, community, or organization that is doing something for freelancers. But even if you just check online, like if you search online, you can find a lot of different things.
Amazing. And a couple here. I actually have one that I can answer, which is, why do editors hardly ever keep the pitched title? And for, you know, as an editor myself, on that end, it's really because we need to fit it in with like whatever editorial style we have going on. So usually editorial publications, online publications will have a certain style for their headlines, and usually tries to fit that. So just that's usually why editors change the title. There can be a little back and forth on that, but a lot of times editors see that as kind of their way of just getting people to click on the article. I have one. It's about kind of finding a direct line to editors here. I'm struggling to find editors' email addresses to pitch to my work, which can be tough to discover online. Do you have any tips for how to easily find or obtain editors' contact information? I have a way of talking about this as an editor, but Christiana, I want to hear your experiences, which is, as an editor myself, I think, you know, usually there is the pitch to us forms. Once you kind of have like an engagement through that, you've been selected through that, and you have an engagement with the editor, that's usually where the personal contact details come in to pitch. But Christiana, I want to know if you have any thoughts to that about how to kind of reach editors if you're having difficulty doing that.
Yeah, so when I started out, I really had no media connections. And I sent pitches like to addresses like info at, hello at, and actually sometimes it worked, like, of course I wasn't pitching like the biggest publications out there, but I was pitching publications that were very respectable and very well known. And if they didn't have like, if they said on their website that the pitches were to be sent at that address, that's what I did, and sometimes it was like these kind of generic addresses. I think the best thing to do is first to search if the publication has guideline, pitching guidelines, because a lot of publications tell you exactly how they want to receive pitches and what kind of pitches they want to receive. Sometimes they even tell you what stories they're covering at the moment, or maybe they're gonna cover in the next issue of the magazine. So it's like, I feel like in time, especially now, it's quite common to find like pitching guidelines on media websites. I also found that, for instance, on X or Twitter, editors often have their email address in their bio, so that's also a way to find them. But I would always follow the guidelines, and then if there are no guidelines, then you have to kind of think, what's the best way to approach this person? Yeah.
I really like this question from Danielle Sedbrook. Can you touch on how you cultivated relationships with editors after writing the first article? I know editors are so busy, and I'm always worried about adding more to their plate by trying to network.
Yeah, so I actually work from like, I moved back to Italy and I work from a small town. So I don't meet editors. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't go to networking events. I don't go out for coffees with them. I work by in my flat and this kind of stuff. So all my networking is basically done online. And it's always been like that. Even when I was living in London, I don't think I ever met one of my editors in person, unless it was like at a journalism event, but like by chance. What I do is like, if I pitch something, I publish something with that editor, I continue to pitch. It's like, not too often, you don't want to seem too aggressive, but like, maybe at the beginning, once a month, you send a pitch. If it's not good, maybe, you can ask for feedback. At this point, you kind of have a relationship with this person because you have already published something with them. So they're more likely to respond to you, So you ask what was wrong, or if it was good, you have another commission. And you build from there. But I think the way we build relationships is by pitching and, refining our pitches, like finding good stories. And these in time can lead to, that relationship I was kind of talking about before, where you may not have like a precise angle, but you think you have an interesting topic, and then you can sort of brainstorm with the editor, but that comes a lot later, I think at the beginning, our tool is the pitch.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We have a couple of questions here, which I think I'm going to kind of group under this entire idea of how to specifically tailor to certain publications so that it kind of catches their eye. When we put in the pitch, you have like the title of your pitch. How do you tailor your pitches to specific articles or specific outlets? Tailor your articles to specific outlets.
So the first thing I do is obviously I need to know the publication, right? So I have to research the publication. That means also checking if they've already written about what I'm pitching, because sometimes happen, you think you have the best idea in the world and you didn't check if they already wrote an article about it, and you send a pitch and you seem a bit like unprofessional, you know what I mean? Because you didn't check the archives. So this is the first thing I do. And if they didn't write about it, I also ask myself, okay, they didn't write about it because I had the best idea ever, or is it because maybe it doesn't fit that publication? These are questions that we always have to keep in mind. And then like, obviously I start putting together my pitch, as I said before, so it doesn't really change. Like my pitches are pretty standard in this, like I include all the details that we said before, all of them. But one thing that I learned is that as a freelancer, I have more chances of getting commissioned if I propose more in-depth stories. that the newsroom cannot quickly put together in-house. So, you know, most of the time, I think that if my story is from a press release or a breaking news, you know, newsroom probably already know that. And if they want to cover it, they can do it in-house with the resources they have. So I tend to pitch more reported features or more in-depth analysis where I have to maybe interview multiple sources or do more in-depth reporting, you know? I also try to think of stories that are timely, but also sort of like evergreen, because for an outlet, it's always important to publish articles that can be relevant for a long time. You know, this is also different between kind of like art news and when you do like features or something like that. I also, you know, when I write my email with my pitch, I make sure to include a short presentation of myself and include a link to my portfolio or to published work that, you know, for instance, I wrote a lot about mental health, right? And in my pitches, I always showed that I already covered the subject, that I was able to find case studies, and that I can write about it maybe in a sensitive way, for instance, no? Because with this subject, it's really important. So even the presentation and the portfolio need to be targeted for that article and for that publication, you know? I didn't write only about mental health, but I didn't put my articles about, I don't know, pitching that I wrote for iGenet because they were not relevant, you know? Also, always try and write an email subject that is effective. You know, I actually learned that some people send pitches without an email subject, and that's really weird because why would they open the email, you know, like, so one standard formula, for instance, is just to write pitch and then add the title that you would like to give the article that you're pitching. So I think these are the main things that I do to tailor my pitches. I hope that was clear.
I think everyone's getting just a lot from what you're bringing to us, Christiana. We're really grateful for everything you're doing. I'm going to have one final question for you to just kind of end this on, which is along the lines of what do you come to your one top line do and don't for pitching that writers should come away from this session with? And
yeah,
what would you know now as an experienced freelance journalist that you wish you had known earlier in your career?
yeah, sure. So for pitching, I'd say, you know, the main things to remember is, as I said, research the publication. I think we need to be very clear about the fact that this is really important. You know, you need to get to know it, check if they're written about what you're pitching, and really ask yourself how your story aligns with their interest, with their readership, with their style, you know. Also, pitch a story and not a topic. So this is really, really important and really hard at first, because I don't think it's that, you know, we're not used to think about, oh, is this news or is this not news? You know what I mean? Like, it's a thing that you get a hang of like after some time, but this is why I think it's really important to read the news, magazine, whatever you're interested in, you know. Also, be thorough but concise. You know, editors are busy. So you need to make sure that your pitch is timely, includes all the details like that we talked about, like the angle, the headline, the sources, the format focus, but also do it in a way that is concise and to the point. So if you send a really long pitch, it will look unfocused and it will look like you don't really know what your story is. And as I said, the editor is not going to look for that story for you. So it's really important to be able to explain things briefly. And also include proof that you can deliver. So that can be the portfolio that we talked about before in all the ways that we talked about before. So, you know, a blog, a newsletter, if I've written previous articles. I only have one don't. And it's like, don't take rejections personally. Everyone has been there. You're not alone. It is part of the job. It's not a reflection of your value or of your skills. You know, sometimes like if a pitch gets rejected, it doesn't even mean that the story idea is bad. It's just maybe the pitch wasn't, you know, crafted as well as it could. So use rejections as learning experiences. And as for things I wish I had known, so One is for sure that you can be a freelance journalist from anywhere, there are always things happening around you, and you can find inspiring stories even if you live outside of a major media city. I lived in London, which was a pretty major media city, but then I moved back to a small town, and I actually don't regret it. And actually my work doesn't look much different from, when I was living in the UK. So, talk to people. You can find stories everywhere around you. Obviously, if you want to be, I don't know, a war reporter, you cannot do that from where I live, thank God. But in most cases, I really think you can be a journalist from anywhere, even if I know that most media jobs are concentrated in just just a small number of cities. But that's why we're freelancing, so we don't have to be there. And another thing is, as a freelance journalist, it's wise not to rely solely on pitching articles for income. You need to consider diversifying your income early on, because it's really hard to make the pitching and writing cycle sustainable in the long term, which is why I talked a lot about, building lasting relationships with editors. But you also may need to think beyond that. It didn't take me too long to realize this, but maybe I could have been a bit more proactive even before. But yeah, so you will see that when you start pitching, it will become quite clear to you that you also have to find other ways to sustain your work.
Cristiana Bede, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I've seen a ton of reactions, tons of hearts and claps and thumbs up from all your comments. So thank you so much for talking to us today, and for talking to us about the pitching and editing process, the relationship with editors. I hope that everyone in the audience got a lot of good advice coming out today. And thank you again. We'll see everyone on the forum in about 2 weeks again for our next session. Cristiana, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll end it here. Thank you, everyone.